Everyone. This is our 2023-24 school year budget hearing. Tonight is September 13th, 2023. This is the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. Sue, can you please take the roll call?
Mark Borowski.
Here.
Betty Koenig.
Here.
Carrie Kozlowski.
Here.
Mark Moore.
Here.
Diane Voigt.
Here.
Patrick McCaffrey.
Here.
Anthony Zenobia.
Here.
David Wad.
Here.
Kelly Piasek.
Here. Tonight, we're going to start by having Mr. Clark provide a summary of the 23-24 preliminary budget. And after that, we will open up the meeting to the public for any input or comment or questions. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, thank you. The district's budget hearing is an annual event it's been being held in September, but it also it's provide a benchmark of where we are in the budget development process for the 23-24 budget. This conversation started last November and will continue until late October when the Board of Education takes action on the final budget and tax levy. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide the members of our school community a chance for input in the development of the budget. The preliminary budget has been published in the Waukesha Freeman, with copies also available in the business office located here at the Blair Administration Building at 301 Hyde Park Avenue. I put together just a very short slide deck to kind of summarize or highlight some of the things that are currently included in the current fiscal year budget. So I'll walk you through some of the key assumptions. We'll talk about the tax levy and rate, where we thought it was back when this preliminary budget was approved in early August. I'd also like to highlight that this preliminary budget was based on things we knew in May, June, and early July. And during that time, a state budget was passed, but this is what the board approved to come to this hearing. I'll talk a little bit about additional information we're getting and then the flow of information that we'll be receiving from this point till the end of October when the final tax levy and budget is approved. The key budget assumptions, and I just grabbed the bigger items. District revenue limit authority is based on a decrease of 168 students and a 10% increase in the voucher programs offered by the state of Wisconsin. The equalization aid amount, which the Department of Public Instruction issues a July 1 estimate, we're using that number. As of now, it won't be that number, but it could be very close to that. And that's really what's stopping us from finalizing the tax levy and rate calculation at this point. Early on, we tend to use a more conservative number on property valuation. The preliminary budget's based on a 5% increase in equalized property valuation, and I'll share some revised estimates in the next slide. The budget also includes the full utilization of the remaining ESSER funding, which is down to just being ESSER 3. This is just going to be used on instructional materials and HVAC improvements at several of our sites. And then the operational budget calls for the use of $2.65 million of fund balance with total revenues of nearly $165 million and total expenditures of $167.5 million. Again, we know the expenditure side because right now we know what our revenue more than likely is going to be. The only thing we don't know is the funding sources between property taxes and state aid. So it enables us to go ahead and build the expense side, and then we wait on the next few weeks to get additional information to finalize the level of local taxation. Based on those assumptions, these are the numbers, and if you have the budget book, preliminary budget book, or looking at it through board docs or on our website, there's more detailed information out there. But the preliminary budget has us with a levy of $83.6 million. That's an increase of 5.76% over last year. Again, this is our preliminary number based off of a set of assumptions that we all agreed on back in January. I would also remind everyone that last year the levy actually went down 10.2%, so this number can fluctuate greatly. The new information we have is related to property valuation within the school district of Waukesha. The preliminary budget used 5% growth, which resulted in a tax rate of $6.01 per $1,000 valuation. The latest estimates we have puts the EAV growth at 9.3% or a tax rate of 5.78%. So this is just an example of how these numbers, whether it be levy or rate, are going to change between now and October 22nd. The rate change based on the preliminary budget, again, I'm here to talk about that document, but I think it's important to share this tax information as well as it matures through the process. Even at the $6.01, if you look at taxation through the mill rate, and that's the most commonly talked about number, obviously the levy is the core of that calculation. At $6.01, we would be looking at a 0.72 rate increase. If the EAV comes in at 9.3%, which at this point I think is very likely it'll be in that neighborhood, we would actually see a rate increase of 19 cents or 3%. Again, the rate valuations are growing, assessed value valuations are increasing, but our levy is also increasing. I'm not here to dodge that by talking rate. I think that's often done in schools. But I do think we will do some good work to lower that number between now and the end of October, whether it's a better aid number than what we projected, looking at our defeasance of our long-term debt, things like that to help lower that number and kind of stabilize the levy itself. So the last column far to the right is all to be determined. So the way the meeting schedule falls every year, the board, the finance committee and the Board of Education will meet, and normally within 3 days of those meetings, I will get the actual equalization aid number and be able to share that number pretty quickly with the board and produce that final budget document. So what don't we know? Here's kind of the list. These are the things we need to calculate our final tax levy and rate. The student count will happen this Friday. It's the earliest, the third Friday in September pupil count can occur. October 15th, we'll get our equalization aid. We need to find out our final property valuation, which I touched on the last slide. Our levy is part of the statewide voucher programs. They run those revenues and expenditures through our financial statements. So if those voucher programs take off, our revenue limit will grow, but with that comes a matching expense to fund those voucher programs. And then lastly, we will continue to talk about the level of long-term debt defeasance or prepayment of our debt related to the successful 2018 referendum. And here's the actual calendar in the green. This is where we are as of today. And the rest you can just see. It all ends up with us certifying the tax levy with the 7 municipalities that the school district of Waukesha serves. And that's another thing. I know there's been reassessments out. The city has reassessed. Maybe some of the other smaller communities have with double-digit reassessments. But the growth within and the relationship between all those municipalities doesn't make it as simple to say this year my rate times my new assessed value is going to lead to my new property tax bill. There's a lot of variables. I'll give the example of Municipality A reassessed this year, and Municipality B hasn't done it in 5 years. Their growth and valuation is going to be different, and that just how we disperse the levy to all these municipalities will reflect that. And that's a constant flow of different data points. So we send out our total levy, and then it's whatever the property valuation of those 7 municipalities, whatever that relationship is, will drive. So very few people will get a 7 or 5.72% if everything stays the same. Very, very few people will hit that number right on the nose because there's all these different variables involved. So October 15th, as I mentioned, that's a very important date. We'll get our equalized valuation on the 1st, and then on the 15th, the aid and the voucher programs, and then we can bring it all together with the final number. Our goal is always to come in lower in fall. I can't promise that, but the Finance Committee chose to take a more conservative assumption with our aid and come in with a little higher levy, we hope, for the preliminary budget. And that's our normal what we'd like to see happen. I don't know why that shouldn't happen. How much that drop would be, I can't tell you at this time. What's included in this budget? We throw out the numbers, it's over, for operational purposes, over 160 million. Here are what goes into this dollar amount and the decisions this board makes throughout the year that culminates into a budget document. Included is approved employee compensation and benefits. The board once again approved employee one-time stipends to move us forward and to protect us from ongoing costs versus one-time costs. Approval of facility improvement and safety projects. Continuation of school site carryover program, which allows schools to save unspent budget dollars rather than, having that urge to spend down their site budget. It includes the final phases of the approved ESSER projects, either it be facility projects or the learning materials set to be purchased. And if you look at historical data and try to compare how we're doing as a district, total expenditures to total expenditures year after year, keep in mind that ESSER is really making total expenditures artificially fluctuate. So it's really hard to see a trend line or anything because there's just this influx of one-time money that kind of skews the whole thing. Also included is the operational savings from the sale of the Lindholm and Randall buildings that were completed earlier this calendar year. It includes the addition of 8 FTE and special education teaching staff. It continues the defeasance of long-term debt that I mentioned earlier. Authorizes, if needed, we're self-funded, so if our claims are good, we won't need the use of these reserves, but the use of $950,000 of district reserves that we use to hold health premiums flat and reduce dental premiums. Again, only claims will tell us if we will access these dollars, so the use of these dollars isn't budgeted for. You're just authorizing me to use them if need be. And then lastly, the elimination of 1 FTE of central office, of a central office administrative position. As I think we mentioned earlier, the preliminary budget document, it's available in board docs under this meeting. It's also available on our website, and you can also stop by the business office if you would have the desire to have a hard copy of that document. The proposed tax levy, as I mentioned, includes continuing defeasance. We're on pace at this rate to pay off the debt in 6 levy years rather than 10, to have enough funds to pay it off. We're analyzing that again to kind of see what's the best move when we see that final tax levy number. But I do want to point out that this analysis and the defeasance, we go through this every year. And between shortening the debt schedule and advancing payments, we've saved the taxpayers $1.7 million in interest expense. So those are tax dollars we'll never have to approve. The payments disappear. So those savings are being dispersed throughout all the households in our school community. In looking at the preliminary budget, the related tax levy information, it's important to keep in mind that the budgetary assumptions used to create this budget were based on the best available information when this version of the budget was approved. As I mentioned earlier, this is a dated document at this point, especially on the revenue side. The preliminary budget is in full compliance with state of Wisconsin revenue limit legislation and is the product of a year-long process that included a series of decisions and conversations. So that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that may arise.
Okay. Our public hearing tonight is an opportunity for the members of our school community to share their thoughts and provide input on the budget that's been presented. As Mr. Clark mentioned earlier, the final budget and tax levy will be approved and adopted at a future meeting in October. Though tonight is the public's formal opportunity to provide input, I want to invite all the members of our school community to reach out to Mr. Clark at any point in the budget development process to share their thoughts and insights. At this time, if anyone is interested in speaking to the board, we will receive comments from those present, and a 3-minute time limit would be allotted to any and all speakers commenting on the budget tonight. Is there anyone that has requested to address the board on the budget this evening? All right, we don't have any speakers tonight, and therefore we will conclude this budget hearing. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.